Welcome to Brat University, a place where we talk about ethical bratting and kink 101 topics. But like any good university, there are some rules that need to be followed while you are here. This is an 18 plus podcast, so if you are under the age of 18, we ask that you stop listening now and come back when you are of age. Second, any of the knowledge in this podcast is based upon the knowledge, experience, and opinions of those who appear on the podcast. Please make sure that you are doing your own research following the listening of this podcast. And last rule, make sure to have fun and enjoy.
Break a heart like an eggshell, cardiac arrest or heart attack. Throw a tantrum, baby doll me up cause I'm a brat. I'm a handful, demi devil pyromaniac. Bitch I am one, throw a tantrum.
Hello and welcome to Brat University. I am your professor Brattastic.
And I'm Tatiana the Chaos Brat.
And today we are talking about the phrase kink is customizable. I personally like this phrase. I honestly didn't start hearing that until I was on Kink Talk. And honestly, I wish it was something that I had been more aware of prior to that.
Yeah, I love that phrase because what is right and wrong for each person, dynamic, group of people, whatever, is going to differ. And there are no specific rules to kink that other than the general, safety, consent, awareness of what risks you're taking. There aren't rules of a sub has to be this way, a switch has to be this way, a dom has to be this way. And that's what's so fun about it.
I think a big thing that hit home for me is, how I did kink and, what I expected. And then a big eye-opener was what I considered a dom to be. And for me, and this once again is like my personal experience and obviously based on like what I like, but I was like, a dom is supposed to, create rules. A dom is supposed to like guide you and keep track of you and all of that stuff. But then I realized not every dom is like that. Not every dom wants to give rules or wants to reward or punish you. Some doms are just bedroom doms and don't do outside of the bedroom stuff. And I always thought, well, that made you a fake dom. You're not really a dom. You're just a top that likes to call yourself a dom. And then I realized how toxic of a view that was.
Yeah, I definitely think, because I have topped girls before, but I always say I top in a dominant way because I'm not comfortable calling myself a dom. So I just say I top in a dominant way. But definitely, whether your kink lifestyle is, the most high protocol TPE 24/7 thing you can think of, or if it's just something you do for fun, like once a week, it's still your thing. It's still your hobby, in lack of a better term. For some people, it's a whole lifestyle. For some people, it's not, and that's fine.
Yeah, no, I ran into that too because me, I feel like kink is very much part of who I am. Like, I've tried to do the vanilla thing and I don't like it. I've also tried to be with doms that are just bedroom dominance, and that's not a thing for me. And I assumed because these people didn't fit my mold that they weren't doms, and I feel so like, I'm going to say I felt stupid. I'm not stupid, but I felt stupid considering I came into the community and, I had all these people telling me, well, a sub is this and a sub is that. And I was like, nuh-uh, like you can't just put subs in a box. And here I was doing the same thing to dominant people. And I was just like, you can't do that, Zoe. Like you can't just put doms in a box.
Yeah, definitely. It's unfair when people do it to S-types or D-types And I think a huge thing is no one, when it comes to roles as a dom, you know, like if we were to say like sadist, daddy dom, whatever, everyone's a mix of things. So like, you know, everyone is so different, and that's not to say like you can't be compatible with someone unless your kinks match up perfectly and you both want the exact same thing at the exact same time. Um, it doesn't have to be like that. If you want to enter a full dynamic that extends outside the bedroom, things grow and develop in ways that you didn't really think they would. I find myself saying like, wow, if someone had told me a year ago that I would be in 24/7 free use PPE dynamic, I would have been like, you are fucking crazy. I would never do that. And it just ended up naturally building. And it was definitely an interesting journey.
I like how you brought up, you know, people having different labels, and I think that, and it doesn't just apply to kink, but obviously given the podcast that we have, we're going to keep it here, but like labels are helpful, but I feel like they also can be detrimental in the community because, you know, I say that I'm a switch, but I am submissive most of the time, and I'm like, that doesn't make me any less of a switch. Like right now I have a submissive, like, and not just like in the bedroom, like I have them required to tell me good morning, to tell me what they ate for the day, and like things like that. And not that the fact that it's outside the bedroom is more important than anything, but I'm just saying, like, you know, I am like I am a dominant to somebody, and now when I'm not engaging with them, yeah, like I'm submissive most of the time, but I do enjoy being dominant. And someone would say, you know, it makes me feel like the whole thing with being bisexual, and like if you're not 50-50, they're like,
Oh,
well, you're
yeah.
not really bisexual. And I'm like, because as a bisexual person, I prefer men. And I'm like, that doesn't make me any less bisexual. Like I just lean more towards men
Yeah.
than women. And
I'm the same. I'm same but opposite. Lean more towards women than men, but here I am with a very tall British man as my dom.
I feel like for me that's shifting a little bit, where like women are becoming more prevalent, but I don't know if that has something to do with like me running into a slew of asshole men recently.
Oh. Yeah.
So I'm like, let's step back and process. Like, is this really a thing, or are you just sick of men right now?
Yeah, sometimes I just had to take a step back and be like, okay, Tatiana, I know you've had to deal with a lot of, like, especially being a person on the internet, weird, creepy, invasive men. And I try so hard not to generalize, but like I tell my guy friends sometimes, you guys make it hard sometimes for me not to generalize. Some of you guys are weirdos.
But like who was I watching? I was watching Sunny Megatron, and if no one knows who Sunny Megatron is, you need to like go follow them on TikTok. They have a podcast called American Sex, and
don't they have a book?
They have a book. They've been in magazines. Like, just Google Sunny Megatron and find all the awesome things. But they were talking about how like you could be a little and a dominant at the same time, and I was like, what? A dominant little? Like, that doesn't make sense. And then like she explained a scenario where that would be possible. Like, let's say you're a princess, and like your daddy's job is to like basically please you and do whatever you say. So if you're like, take me to go get ice cream, like that's what they would do. So basically,
yeah.
you're kind of being like a spoiled little almost.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, so like, and that brings me back to like the brat term. Like someone told me like there's bratty doms, and I was like, bratty doms are a thing, and I was like, oh, yeah, there are. And so it's interesting that like these labels people want you to fit in this little box, like littles can only be submissive, or like these labels can only be this. And I think that labels can be limiting sometimes, and if you don't fit inside that box, then people judge you or chastise you because you're not doing it the way that they think that you should.
Yeah, exactly. And someone asked me recently, how does being in a 24/7 brat dynamic work out for you? And I usually say it's a lot of fun and we laugh our asses off a lot of the time. But also, it requires a lot of negotiation. And I know probably most DOMs I know would not be as interested in the level of bratting that my DOM loves. And so when people ask that, I'm like, well, I don't know. It's just kind of who we are. It's what's
Right.
natural for us. And of course, there are people who are like, well, you're not a real sub if you're not obeying. And, it's just, well, we do things differently. And if we're both enjoying it and getting a laugh out of it and really satisfied in where we are in our relationship and dynamic, like, why do you care?
I'm gonna use a thing that like the doms on TikTok have said, that like if you're bratting and your dom likes it, you're just doing what your dom told you to do, so you're not really a brat. And I always hated that because I'm like, no, don't flip that on me. But it's kind of true. I always tell people bratting is, and I just did a podcast with somebody talking about bratting, and I was like, it's simulated disobedience. You're not actually like, let's say you have a rule to, I don't know, go to bed at 8. You're not staying up till 10 o'clock on purpose every single night just to piss them off, because that's not what you agreed upon.
Yeah.
Um, but I could see me as a brat pushing the limits, like, oh no, it's 8:10 and I'm not in bed yet. And I might be like grabbing something to drink or something, but I'm like, oh no, it's 8:10, something like that. You're never like just
Yeah.
outright breaking the rules. Now there might be dynamics out there where that is okay, but from my personal experience, which is kind of what this podcast is based off of, my knowledge that I've found, and just talking to other brats and my own personal experience, no one just is like, hey, give me the rules and I'm just going to outright break them, bend them, push them. But I've never met a brat that's just like, yeah, fuck your rules.
Yeah, I think I've said this before. We have our bratable and non-bratable rules. So, the ones I can push back against, or the ones I can kind of argue a little bit, or even sometimes break for a punishment or something like that. But then, there are the non-bratable ones where it's like, hey, it's not cute, funny, and like teasing when you push this rule or break this rule. Like, this one is here for your own good. It's not part of, like, I don't know, the cute stuff. I don't know what other word to use. The
Right.
flirting, the kink.
That'd be like me going, one of my rules is to take my meds. Like, I have to take my meds. And it'd be like, well, I took some of them. Like, that's not even, like, that's not something that is bendable or pushable or breakable in any way. Like, I will get in trouble for not taking my meds.
Yeah. And like, one of my bratable rules is like, I can't stick my tongue out at him. Sticking my tongue out, he knows this, is just an automatic reaction I have. So the only purpose for that rule really is one of those kind of reminder rules, because we are 24/7, of the whole kind of ownership thing, that helps me feel really secure. But then also, is he deeply hurt by it? No, not at all. Like, it's more of a rule there for a punishment.
But I love this kink is customizable thing. We'll probably do a whole episode on it, but like the big hot button thing I keep seeing around TikTok at least is the need for safe words and aftercare, and people being like, well, if you don't use safe words, you're not being safe, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, well, it depends on the relationship. Like me and my nesting partner, like, granted, they're there and I can use them, but it rarely happens because he just kind of knows me and he knows where I need to stop, and we do. And once again, it's not to say that like I don't have safe words or that I can't use them, but for the most part, when we play, I don't play with safe words because he just knows. And I mean, I wouldn't recommend doing that with someone you just met, like, not in any way. But in my dynamic, I think if someone heard that, like, yeah, I don't really play with safe words, they'd be like, oh my God, you don't have safe words? And I'm like, I've been with him for 2 years. And he and I played prior, like a few years ago, so it's like, it's not like he doesn't know me or anything like that. And so I'm just like, I have that level of trust where I'm just like, I don't feel that I need them, but I know that they're there just in case.
Yeah, and I'm somewhat similar, I would say, because we are at a level where we know each other well enough that we can basically check in and safe word during scenes without having to really yank ourselves out of the scenes really hard. Like, and it's just a communication thing and something that's come down to learning each other, learning our nonverbal signals, being comfortable talking to each other and being vocal. And yeah, like, it took a lot of practice, but I have my safe words, but I don't need to use them all that often because usually it doesn't get to the point where I need to safe word.
I did the other day. It was in a text message because my partner was sending flirty, naughty text messages, and there's been a recent change in my life that something that used to be okay no longer was, and I didn't want like the flirty fun to stop, so I yellowed just to be like, hey, I don't really like that. Can we not do that? And then it proceeded. But like, I swear that was like the first time I'd safe worded in like a good while. But like I said, they're there in case I need them. We made up one for when we're in public because he likes to mess with me, and it's not even really kink related. Like, when we get into our episode about bratty doms, like, I have a lot of stuff I could say about him, but
oh yeah,
he likes messing with me, and there are some times where I'm like, I just don't want that anymore. And so I think for me it felt weird to be like red in public because I'm like, why would I say that? And so like my public safe word is amethyst, and because my favorite TV show is Steven
more
Universe.
Casual than red.
Because I talk about Steven Universe a lot, which is why I was trying to explain, like, my favorite TV show is Steven Universe. So I could tie that into a sentence.
Okay.
And it wouldn't seem weird. So, like, if I'm being bothered, I'll be like, I'll bring up her character, but, like, he knows what I'm doing. So I don't just say amethyst and leave that
Okay.
there. Like, no. But he knows when that's said, like, out of the blue, or I bring, like, that up out of the blue, her specifically. Like, he's like, oh. So, but, you know, I guess I could add red to something, but, like, God forbid, we're at the store, like, look at, like, a color's different when, like, you're out looking at things, but I'm like, if I'm at the grocery store, I have no reason to talk about an amethyst. Like, there's no reason for that to.
Yeah, you could be like, look at that red tomato.
Right. I've done that, like, clothes shopping. Like, I went and I was buying him shirts, and I literally said, like, oh, I got you this red one. Like, I don't want him to accidentally think, like, oh shit, like, you know. I was like, red, when you're out shopping or doing something, can be harder to mingle into conversation, whereas me talking about my favorite TV show that I literally will talk about pretty much with anyone at any time, and it's not unusual for me, you know, it goes better. But back to the kink is customizable thing, I think it's really important for newbie people to know that like, your kink might not look like somebody else's, and that's okay. Like, you shouldn't look at one person and be like, I want to be just like them, because you could change, you could develop, and, you know, people need to understand that as long as both or all parties, depending on how many people you have involved, are consenting, you know, then I say have fun, unless whatever you're doing is, like, super
Unless it's a felony, you know.
Right. Well, I don't know. It depends, because in some places, I don't know if kink is ever a felony, but I know in some places kink is illegal.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But I guess I am talking, if you're going out and hurting other people or causing a ruckus and committing crimes in public, that's where it becomes a little bit of an issue.
Right.
More than a little bit.
If you're harming other people outside your dynamic, you do not have consent from them, and so you already, like, just butchered the first rule of kink, which is, you know, consent. Like, you need that from everybody.
Yeah. And I think something a lot of newer kinksters, because a lot of them find out about kink through TikTok now,
which is it's good, but also unfortunate.
Yeah, I do think there are some things that are talked about on Kink Talk that a lot of newbies maybe should learn the basics first before they learn all the nuance. Kind of like how you learn the steps to the quadratic equation before you actually learn the equation. It very much depends on the topic, though. But I think when you're a newbie kinkster, listening to the basic 101s of it, you know, safe words, aftercare, all that stuff is very important. But as you go through your kink journey, you'll realize that your needs are different. Every partner's needs are different. And the way you want to play and form a dynamic is not going to look like someone else.
I will also tell people not to get caught up in labels. Like, I call myself a brat. Now, is that the only part of me? No. I am also a service sub. Like, I love doing domestic tasks, like going to get food, giving drinks. I like making sure the bed is made, things like that. I'm also a pet. I'm also a little. Like, there are a lot of other things in there besides a brat. Now, I label myself as a brat because it kind of finds its way into everything except my service. Like, when I do that, there's no bratting in my service, but in pretty much every other thing that I do, you know, I'm bratting. And so, like, that's where I get my label from. But I feel like people shouldn't be caught up in labels, or if they're doing something and they can't find a label that fits them, and I'm like, that's totally fine. You don't have to find a label for them. So I caution people in getting caught up in labels as well, like getting themselves caught up in labels.
Yeah, like something I did with a bunch of subs the other day was say, hey, if you could make a pie chart of who you are, Just because there are a lot of people I know, they're like, oh, well, I can really only be one thing. Like, my identity has to fit into this one box. And it's like, no, like, you could be 7.5% pet, you could be, 12.6% little, you could be
Right.
53% service sub. Like, it was just a fun thing to do where people were all like, wow, I didn't realize like there are so many pieces of who I am as a sub. And it was really interesting to see people's responses and realizations through that.
Not that, once again, I recommend people doing it, but because it was such a craze for a while, the BDSM test, honestly, I feel like was a great way of showing that. Like, it didn't just say, well, you're this percent sub and this percent dom, or like give you one title. It was like, here's a percentage of all of these different things that, are you. And, Brat was at, obviously at the top of the list, like 100%. But
Oh yeah.
I like rope, but I don't consider myself a rope bunny at all. And with this particular test, it was confirmed, because like rope bunny is towards the top, because obviously a lot of the dominant stuff is at the bottom. But it's not very high. Like, I enjoy it, but it's not something I actively seek out all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But so don't get caught up in labels. Like, they, at the end of the day, they really don't matter. I just find that labels help when you're trying to, I would say, find a partner. It can become easier. Compare it to my sexuality for a second. Like, I actually explained this to someone at my job. I wore a shirt because it's Pride Month, and it had all these different flags on it. And the funny thing was, even though they were a lesbian, they're just like, well, why do we all need these different flags? Why can't we just have one? I was like, well, technically the rainbow flag is for everybody. But I said, okay, think about this. Let's say we all had one flag, right? And they're a lesbian and identify as bisexual. But if we all had one flag, you wouldn't know that, like, they clearly only like women, and I like, multiple genders. And so I'm just like, having one flag doesn't explain that enough. And so it becomes an easy identifier. And the same thing with like labels and kink. I'm just like, if I see someone's profile and they put daddy at the top, I'm like, okay, that gives me a good start, especially if like a daddy is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. And also, I think it's just kind of fun. Like,
oh, it is.
I'm one of those people who loves taking like those little quizzes and stuff, and just looking into everything like that. And also, like, with some tests where it said like, oh, I remember at the beginning of my kink journey taking the BDSM test, it was saying, that I had a high percentage of degradee, and I was kind of like, what really is that? So it helped me figure out more.
That's the only reason I might tell someone to look at the BDSM test. Like, it's been shown that it's very like biased for like gender and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
But I do tell
it's
people,
so obvious.
Yeah, I do tell people it's a good jumping off point as far as like finding what your interests are. Even if like you don't take the percentages at the end, looking at different things and figuring out how into this am I, when they give you the scenarios. And I'm like, so I always say, don't just take the BDSM test and be like, oh, that's what I am. Like, no, it's a good jumping off point. So maybe you take like the top 3 things and research into them to see if like it's something you're super interested in. Like, I would say do that with it, because much like you, that's what I did. There were some things that were up there and I'm like, I don't even know what that is. Yeah. And so I went and looked it up.
Yeah, I think it's a well-made test with the way it breaks down the results and how thorough it is. But the way they translate your answers into the results and some of the questions are just so dumb. And Yeah. So I feel like it's good, but it needs to be updated.
I would also say, so this might be kind of controversial, and I don't know if it's going to be, but with kink being customizable, be ready for the fact that you might not fit into a certain group. And I have my own personal experience with that, because I, have my community here, and my behaviors here seem to be just fine, never had an issue. I went with a different group and it was a huge issue. And so I'm just like, initially it kind of made me question everything, but I was just like, maybe it's just not right for this group of people, and that's okay, because like we said, kink is customizable. Not every group is going to be okay with the way you do things, and that's okay. And so it's okay if, like, I've gone to munches with groups and I'm just like, this is not a good fit, and that's okay. Like, don't think because you don't fit in well with like your local community, maybe, like that
that doesn't mean you're a bad kinkster, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. And
because there's a good portion of the leather community that is not a fan of me because of the way I do things and being a brat and XYZ. That's okay. If they're having fun the way they're doing things, I would just like them to let me have fun about the way I'm doing things.
Right. I've run into that too. I've never actually like really been in the leather scene at all, but in my area there tends to be a lot of older kinksters, and even though old guard's not a thing, we are all still like aware of kind of like what it is, and it's basically the mentality of this is a sub, this is a dom, and like I didn't fit in with that group, and so, but that's okay. We just had, differences of the way that we should go about things. This group didn't believe in switches. They just said switches were actually subs that just topped occasionally, and you can't be a dominant if you're then going to turn around and submit to somebody. It was a whole thing.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You don't always have to fit with every single group. And so I would say be wary, or not wary, but aware of that might happen, and that's okay. Things happen. And once again, if you're doing things consensually and ethically, I would say, do you.
Yeah, exactly. And take all the safety measures you can. Be as safe as possible. Make sure everything's as consensual as possible. Well, not as possible. I should not have said it as possible. Everything must be 100% enthusiastically consensual. Correction. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily matter what people think, because it's not some right and wrong kind of thing. It's not like a job where if you break some written in stone kink rule, you're going to get sent to HR and fired. Like, right. That's not how it works.
Well, I think we've had a very productive session today. Is there any little last tidbits that you would like to add on this topic of kink is customizable?
Stay safe and don't get too wild. Make sure you do your research.
Definitely. I'm always education before exploration type person. So I guess my last tidbits are just things we talked about throughout the entire episode. Just don't get caught up in labels, and as long as you have consent, I say do you.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you next time. Class dismissed.
Ding, ding, ding.
Did you like what you heard? Then make sure to never miss a class. You can find us on one of your favorite podcatchers, which include Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Spotify, and Good Pods. You can also find us on Twitter and TikTok at Brat University. Make sure to look in the show notes below to join our Discord server. We can't wait to hear from you.